You're watching the PoliticIt podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. I'm Senator John Johnson, and today on the podcast we've got Rob Axson. Rob, thanks for coming.
So good to be with you. Thanks for the invitation, John.
Yeah. Nice to have you here. Of course, you're the state party chair right now, GOP chair, and you've decided. I don't know who convinced you, but you've decided that maybe you'll try it again.
You know, it's been an eventful 2 years, and I feel like we've made a lot of progress, but there's a handful of things and a number of things that I think will be to Utah's benefit if we keep building towards, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of that here today. So
let's first talk a little bit about you. You've been on before, but I want people to get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what got you into a position like this.
So grew up here in Utah. I was born here in Utah. My folks divorced when I was quite young, and so from about 6 on, I would spend most of the summers up in Canada, where my dad was originally from. He moved back there after the divorce. So I'd spend most of the summers up there, but the totality of the school year here in Utah, mainly in Salt Lake and then in Utah counties.
So what schools did you go to?
So Ensign Elementary, right up there in the Avenues, was where I went for most of elementary. Finished off in Alpine, down in northern Utah County. So there, and then on to junior high school. Graduated from Lone Peak High School.
Lone Peak, okay.
And then went up to the University of Utah. That was back in the time frame if you were going on an LDS mission. In my case, I had a year. It was 19 at the time, so I did a year of college. Once I turned 19, went off on an LDS mission for 2 years in South Korea.
Oh, in South Korea.
And phenomenal place, wonderful experience. Loved Korea, loved Korean food, and then came back, finished my schooling there at the U.
You know, I traveled to South Korea. I used to take students on a study abroad at Utah State, and we would always end up in Seoul.
Yeah,
that was kind of the last part of it.
So, do you like Korean barbecue?
Oh, I love it.
It's good,
I love it. Are there any places in Utah that are good?
There's some good ones, and there's a bunch of new ones that come in the last couple of years. The one that I really like is actually on State Street in Salt Lake. What is it, around 40th South or so, called Jang-Soo-jang.
Oh.
So if anybody's looking for any good Korean food.
Oh, I'll have to try that, because I love Korean barbecue. There's a little place out in North Ogden that serves Korean bowls.
Yeah.
And of course some of the flavors are identical to what I was used to there. But yeah, so South Korea. So do you still have an opportunity to speak Korean? Or?
Unfortunately, I would say most of the Koreans that I run into in Utah much prefer practicing their English than letting me practice my Korean. So I've definitely lost a lot of it, but certainly enjoy anytime I can interact with folks from Korea, and been back there a couple of times, and yeah, just a phenomenal place.
Oh, that's great. So at the University of Utah, what did you study?
So my focus, I got back from my mission in 2004. And so it was interesting. I jumped right back into school. I had done that first year as a freshman, was studying political science before my mission, but a lot of generals as a young freshman. Jumping right back into political science, and a lot of those topics, and we're in the middle of a war. While I was off on my mission, that's when the United States invaded Iraq, and we're engaged in that process. I think I got back right around the time that the surge was being announced. So this idea of bringing in even more troops. And it was certainly a time where it was interesting to have been gone for 2 years. And you hear stuff as a missionary, but you're trying not to pay attention. And you get back, and there's this definite anti-Republican, anti-George Bush fervor there at the university. And so in most of my classes, I assumed there were a lot of Republicans, but most were keeping their mouths shut. And so it actually kind of gave me an opportunity to try to speak about what I believed in, and be willing to be challenged on my ideas, but also raise my opinion and say, no, this is where I think. And did that, did a dual major of international studies and political science, and my focus was always on conflict resolution. And so I was always trying to figure out classes and topics for, essays and projects and things to focus on, like, what are the skills, what are the ways that we can bring the ideas of conflict resolution. At first, I was, of course, focused on international and national politics, but it's been beneficial. Like, it's something that I've continued to try to focus on of what can we do even in neighborhoods, communities, and families to bring about a degree of resolving the conflict and turning down the heat a little bit and figuring out, what's a path forward that's true to what you believe, but maybe a little bit less vitriolic than.
So you ended up graduating then in political science.
Yeah, political science and
studies.
International studies, and then I was finishing up school right when the economy tanked. And so economy is tanking, and I'd paid my way through school, so it was a little bit. I took a couple, 6 years or 5.5 years instead of the 4 that most people do. But I was always working a full-time job, usually a part-time job as well. Putting yourself through school, ended up getting married, so you're kind of balancing all of that of life. 2008, economy tanks, and so I decided, hey, I'm going to stick around, do one more semester. I ended up going out to D.C. as an intern for Congressman Rob Bishop. And
for Bishop.
Did a lot of work for him that semester, and as a married kid, newly married, but my wife, we had been married a couple years. She was pregnant. We found out right before we were going to move out there that she was pregnant, and we decided, hey, stay in Utah. That's where your doctor is and everything else. And so she came and visited me a couple of times during the time that I was out there. But you're married and your wife's clear across the country in Utah. It kind of gave me a cool opportunity. I told the office and the folks I was working with, like, hey, just put me to work. I'm not interested in going and socializing. And so it's like, hey, just give me any project you can. And so I really was able to do a bunch of stuff that helped me cut my teeth in understanding the legislative process there in Congress. It was a lot of fun.
Well, and then, so after that, what did you?
Yeah, so came home from that and jumped back into, okay, what's next? And was deciding, do I go to graduate school? What do I want to do? And at the time, this would have been spring of 2009 that I was in Washington, D.C. So get back summer of 2009. And it's this lead up to the 2010, which was the midterm elections for Barack Obama's first term. And so you have the Tea Party movement that's moving. You have a lot of this reaction against some of these big spending projects that had happened at the tail end of the Bush administration. And then certainly Obamacare, all of these things are starting to move forward. And so I started looking at, what do I want to see? And we had a Senate seat in Utah. Senator Bob Bennett was up for re-election. But a number of people were starting to put their names forward, and I got involved in campaigns. And the first one that I did, I actually signed on and was the campaign manager for an individual that I knew named Derek Brown. And he hired me to be his campaign manager. He was running for the state legislature. And so I ran his campaign.
So that was your first connection with Derek?
Yeah, well, we had been connected for about 1.5 years or 2 years. My wife, shortly after we got married, so I guess a little bit longer than that, maybe 3 years at that point. When we got married, she then ended up going and working for a company that Derek and his wife owned.
Oh.
And so that's how I first met Derek. And we always talked politics. He had formerly been an employee of a couple of different Senate offices back in D.C. And so now he's running for the state legislature, and I'm like, hey, sign me up. I'd love to help you. So working on that, and he also said, I've got this friend who I used to practice law with. Let me introduce you to him. And he introduced me to his buddy Mike, Senator Mike Lee now. But this buddy Mike, who was just a former law associate with Derek Brown. And very quickly I realized, hey, this guy, if he's running for the Senate, is worth getting behind, and ended up working on Senator Lee's original election, and once he was elected, I
you know what, a lot of people, I know Mike's really popular with the delegates and stuff, but a lot of people don't realize that he was not in first place coming out of that convention.
No, and in fact, he was pretty close to being eliminated in the convention, and Tim Bridgewater would have come out of that as the sole nominee and advanced as the party nominee and would have been in the Senate. Senator Lee barely kind of got through that process, but then...
So those two made it out, but Bob Bennett didn't.
Bob Bennett did not. Bob Bennett was in third place. So Tim Bridgewater, Mike Lee come out of that, and his team and Senator Lee were laser focused. They worked very hard in
And you were on that campaign then?
Yep. Oh. And I think it was the 28th, maybe, if I'm remembering right, of June, maybe the 27th, but right around there. And yeah, we ran all the way to the finish line and ultimately had a very good night. And Senator Lee became the Republican nominee, and the rest is history in the sense that he's now gone back and he's done exactly what he said he would do. He's stayed committed to limited government, being very careful on when we engage in military conflict and having that as a last resort, a belief in sovereignty and states' rights and federalism, and really anything on kind of the Constitution. What I love about Senator Lee, among a number of things, is he's one of those, he has always said what he believes. He has always said who he is. And whether you agree with him or not,
He's defended that.
He's been transparent.
Right.
He's let you know. And I think that that's a sign of respect to voters and to constituents, that he lays it out there of where he is. That allows you to know where to start a conversation.
Interesting. Yeah, that's well. And then after Mike Lee wins, were you part of his staff?
Yeah, so he wins that
winter?
November. He invites me onto his staff. So I spent almost 3 years back in Washington, D.C. in his office, working on various legislative issues, a lot of lands issues, states' rights issues, pro-life issues, some dealing with healthcare, and also pro-Second Amendment issues. Those were the main issues that I was working on while I was out there. Then I transferred back to Utah, still with his staff, and I continued working for him for a total of, about 13 years or 13 and a half years, and ultimately was his state director for 7 years, managing all of his Utah operations.
And that's when you first got involved with the statewide party?
Yeah,
right?
Through that process, I saw the party is an amazing facilitator and has the potential to be that. Sometimes it falls far short of that. But you have folks that are on the line working their tail off to get good people elected. So you've got grassroots, delegates, voters. Then you have good candidates that are putting their reputation on the line. People like Senator Lee, people like yourself and others who have said, hey, this is what I believe, I'm willing to serve. And again, I realized the party could do a lot to bring all of that together and really move forward what we believe. And sometimes it was falling short. So, about 6 years ago, I started getting more heavily involved, aside from just attending caucus and being a delegate. And ran for the State Central Committee 6 years ago, was elected, became the Constitution and Bylaws chair for a number of months. And then there was a vacancy. The vice chair had stepped away to run for office. So I ran and filled the rest of that term for about a year. And then after Derek was done, Carson Jorgensen.
So you were the chair. You were the chair. You were the vice chair.
Vice chair under Derek Brown.
Under Derek Brown, but you didn't run with it. You didn't run with him.
So I was the vice chair with him for maybe 14 months out of the 2 years, 15 months out of the 2 years, and we had a lot of fun trying to pay off all the debt. We started off, when Derek started off, I think it was like $400,000 in debt was where the party was. When I came in, I think it was closer to 300 or so, but worked hard to try to retire that. We're successful in that. And then the next term was Carson Jorgensen's time. I was on the State Central Committee, and then ultimately when Carson was wrapping up his time, I decided that I was in a place where I could bring all of my experience and all the connections that I have over the last 13 years working in DC and working here and working in campaigns. And I was in this place that I felt I could bridge some of the divides that exist within the party to elevate the party's abilities and hopefully reach more of our potential. So I had a couple of months before told Senator Lee, hey, I'm going to head off to the private sector and leave your office. And a month before I left the office, I decided I'm going to run for party chair. So just when I was stepping away from politics a little bit, I stepped right back in, and so was elected 2 years ago, and it's been an eventful and exciting and very instructive, but also productive last 2 years.
Right. Hey, we're going to take a break, and we'll come right back.
Hey, sounds good.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We're talking with Rob Axson, who is the state party chair and a candidate to be the state party chair again.
Yep, running for re-election.
Yeah, so great. So right before the break, one of the themes that came up a lot is you're actually pretty good friends with Derek Brown.
We go way back.
Which actually brings up a question that I have. I know, Derek actually came in third place at the convention, and I know right after the convention, you made a concerted effort to promote the convention winners.
Yeah, great question. That is a big priority that I came into these last 2 years with, was to try to do everything we could as a party to build the relevance of the caucus convention system. I'm a big believer and a big fan of that system. Our principles are what we believe in, right? Our platform. Right. But that delegate process, that's the mechanism that we fight for those principles, find good candidates, good people to be elected and represent us. So absolutely love the caucus convention system. And as everybody knows, certainly any delegates watching know, in 2014, we had a law that came out of the state legislature that has substantially hindered the ability of the party.
SB 54. Yeah, it's kind of a swear word around the convention. And it's kind of interesting, given that you were on Mike Lee's campaign, because I often call that the Bob Bennett rule, because we didn't have signature gathering before that.
Yep.
Before he lost in convention.
Yeah, there was this tension building for a number of years, and this idea of do we trust the delegates? Do we want to empower the delegates? Do we want to limit the delegates? That was coming from a segment of the state and people involved in politics. I wish that instead of focusing on what they didn't like, they focused on building. They could have leaned in and done a lot of good for the state. And so that tension was building, and ultimately, I think you're exactly right. The catalyst was, wait, we had an incumbent U.S. senator lose their re-election because of the delegates. And so there was this blowback reaction, really undeservedly, in my opinion, against the delegate process.
In fact, that's, to me, that's the best example of why we needed the delegates, right? Because if you can get rid of an incumbent, because you're not going to do it with money and ads.
No.
Right? If you can build a grassroots movement behind
it forces
a candidate.
It forces dialogue. It forces discussions. Because in America, the two factors that are most powerful in any election are, first, money, and second, incumbency or name ID. So if somebody's a well-known individual, if they're a celebrity, if they're a local famous individual or comes from a prominent family, that gives them an advantage. Once you're an incumbent with just about ubiquitous name ID, you have a clear advantage. Not only do you then have that advantage, but it's easier for you to raise money. You have those two pieces. The delegate process helps even that out. It helps diminish the role of incumbency and name ID and the power of money, so that anybody with good ideas can be elevated and we get a chance.
Yeah, because I think delegates spend a lot of time vetting candidates, right?
Meaningfully so, and they do a phenomenal job. So, like I said, when I ran 2 years ago, my commitment, and this was part of what actually motivated me to run, was seeing that I was in a unique place with the relationships and network and experience I had to bridge some of those divides and promote our delegate process. And so I made that commitment that we were going to lean in and do all that we could to promote our convention winners and inform people of the outcome of what the delegates had done.
And you did precisely that. And again, coming back to the question I had earlier, one big example of that was the fact that you promoted the convention winners in the race for Attorney General, right?
Yep,
one in which
a dear friend was one of the candidates, but he did not earn the delegate support. There was two other candidates that had received that support that came out. Rachel Terry and Frank Mylar, two great individuals. They did a great job in the race. They had earned that delegate support. And so for me as chair, it's important to do what is right and what is fair. It's not about my own personal opinion or it's not about personal expectations or hopes or what's to my advantage. It's about what is right for the party. And I had committed to do everything we could to promote our convention winners. And so even though I had a long-term relationship and friendship with somebody and had known him a long time who was running for Attorney General, between the convention and the primary, the support of the party went only to those who had the convention delegates' support. And I held firmly to that. And friendship doesn't trump what is the process.
Well, I love those flyers that you worked out where you actually went forward, mailed out things to promote the convention winners. So people were aware of it, right?
Yep. And we did that in all of Salt Lake County, the vast majority of Utah County, a big chunk of Davis, big chunk of Weber, and then about 8 or 9 rural counties. We did it to all of those. We were really targeting battleground areas and then high population areas. So the goal, again, it's, hey, here's all of the results of our convention. Here's who is the sole nominee according to our party rules, regardless of if there was a signature path candidate or people who had won by acclamation, or in the case of again, I mentioned Rachel Terry and Frank Mylar, both earned convention support. And so they were both listed on there. But our goal was get that in front of as many Republicans of our...
So they know who had kind of the seal of the...
Yep.
Right? That was one way to kind of counter this signature gathering process, right?
Absolutely. So between that and a handful of other things we did on get out the vote efforts, text messaging, phone calls, volunteer efforts, we paid for a walking app that was available to convention winners only, data, emails, and direct donations. We raised and really deployed north of $200,000 in direct support of our convention winners. What's interesting is SB 54, I mentioned, passed in 2014. We have had 5 election cycles that have gone through a post SB 54 enactment time frame. So during that time, 5 chairs, 5 election cycles. Last year was the very first time that the party has weighed in post convention in support of our convention winners. And so to anybody who thinks, well, Robert, how do I know that you really support the convention process and you're going to do something or
you
show me that you've done anything for the convention winners? Well, yeah, that example. In 10 years, it's never been done until I was chair.
You know, I kind of want to go back to this issue of the role of the chair. Okay, what is the role of the chair in the process? You know, in the election process, what does the party do? What do the party documents say?
Yeah, I think it's a key thing. The role of the chair is to facilitate certain things. And I think in the principle of it, you're trying to elevate all elements of the party, the grassroots, the donors, the candidates, the elected officials. Like, you're trying to elevate everybody and do it fairly. Well, that absolutely plays out when it comes to the election and nominating process. So you can't have your thumb on the scale. In fact, we have this neutrality requirement that's in place. So you're not ever attacking a fellow Republican. You have to abide by that. We had a party bylaw that I authored actually 6 years ago as the Constitution and Bylaws chair that said after the convention, we can lean in and support our convention winners, which is why we've been able to do that. But aside from that, you have to be fair and neutral. Then you have under state law and our party process, just an element of doing certain things. So like, for example, on April 27th last year is when we had the state convention. April 29th under state law, you have to certify the results. So I had to certify the results. Here's who advanced to a primary from the convention because 2 candidates qualified under the convention. Here's who won by acclamation. And here's who exceeded 60% and is the sole party nominee. So a couple of examples. And
in that case, Phil Lyman was in that category, right?
You can go to our party website. You can see the certification letter that I sent. Sole party nominee according to our rules. Phil Lyman for governor, Trent Staggs for Senate, Mike Kennedy for Congress and CD3. You had Mike Schultz and a handful of other legislators, a couple of state school board members. These were the people who earned 60% or more of the delegate support. They were our sole party nominee. After that part, it's out of our hands as a party. It's now the state election law and the state election process. However efficient or however flawed it may be, that's the process. I have no role in printing ballots. The party has no role in certifying primaries. The party has no role in the general election. And unfortunately, we have to abide by election law, and SB 54 is election law. So we have to abide by state election law. We're required to decide which system we'll use. We agree to recognize the results of a primary, regardless of how a person qualified for the primary. And even folks that sometimes I've had some delegates say, well, why didn't you just ignore election law? Well, I don't think it's right for the party.
And follow, well, what they say is
follow
why
their
don't,
own process.
and follow our rules, our party.
Yeah, because we have a party rule that says, that's a convention rule. It says that the sole nominee will advance to the general election ballot. Well, it's contradicted by state election law. And so they asked me this question, and they say, well, why didn't you just do the one, not the other? Well, if I did the one, I still don't get to control the ballot. So it still wouldn't lead to any other outcome. But what I like to point out to them, go and look at our party constitution. Article 1, Section B of the party constitution lays out the 3 purposes for the Republican Party. So the Utah Republican Party has 3 purposes according to our Constitution. First is to nominate and elect Republican candidates in partisan office. The second is to promote the principles of the Republican Party as laid out in our party platform. And the third is to interface with the state and to abide by state election law. That's what we have to do. So even our own party documents require us as the law and order party to follow the law.
That's great. So let me ask you about a few other things too. I noticed that the other thing you did as party chair was you guys were out front and center on helping Trump across the West.
Oh, absolutely. Because Utah's a phenomenal place, right? Like, we all love calling Utah home. We're all lucky enough to have either been born here or realized, hey, I need to move to Utah and make it home. I'm grateful for that. But we also are smart enough to realize no matter how good it is at home, and even when we're falling short and need to improve, it's still a phenomenal place. But what happens in the country matters. Who controls the White House absolutely matters. Who controls the Senate and the House in Congress? Those things matter. And so I looked at it, and in my lifetime, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, or Arizona and Nevada have all gone from leaning Republican or solid Republican to now leaning Democrat or solid Democrat. We're literally surrounded on all 3 sides. That's happened in the last 30 years. So we're next. If we're not careful, Utah is next. With the number of people moving in here, with the number of children we have, if we're not communicating our principles to the next generation, we stand to lose what makes Utah great. And no longer will we be a red state, but we'll be a purple state and potentially even a blue state. I refuse to see that happen. So we have to do everything on the home front to protect Utah. But I believe you have to be your neighbor's keeper, right? You have to be your brother's keeper.
Right.
We have these neighboring states, and sometimes, just like in football, the best defense is a strong offense. And so let's go to and deploy and figure out ways that we can help in these other states. We focus specifically on Nevada and Arizona because those were 2 presidential battleground states, but they also had other congressional races and Senate races. And so we were able to deploy nearly 1,000 Utah volunteers over the course of a number of weeks into those 2 states. And we did in both states one.
That was led by this statewide party.
It was led by us, and I made that decision about a year before that I want to be a part of making sure that a Republican retakes the White House. And once we knew that it was Donald Trump was our nominee, let's make sure that that man, with all the experience and wisdom he would have experienced from his first term, is back in the White House to deliver for America. And we did it. We delivered. We were a part of that solution.
And that's where a lot of this outside funding came into Utah, was to help you deploy those things, right?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do, I didn't want to cannibalize against what we were raising and needing to do to win races in Utah and build the party in Utah to go and help in other states. Like, happy to help there, but we have to keep that home front. But right. I believe that you could do both. So I made the case, and we employed a couple of different ideas and events that we were able to bring to bear that excited and enticed donors from outside of Utah who would never have given money to the Utah Republican Party because they're worried about their own states. But they realized Utah's willing to do all the logistics. Utah's willing to put forward the volunteers. And let's be honest, Utahns are good at knocking doors.
Right.
A lot of us have done it. You know, I was in Korea, I talked about it. So like the idea of 1,000 Utahns going down and talking to people who are very similar to us, maybe even friends and family, and knocking doors for Trump and knocking doors for the principles, we could do that. So it excited these donors. And so we were able to raise funds that were not cannibalizing the funds we needed in Utah, but instead it was specifically earmarked for this idea of helping go into Arizona and Nevada. I went down into Arizona, and I took my 2 oldest sons, and we were down there for 4 or 5 days or 4 days. And it was special. It was fun. It was not like knocking doors with my 2 sons. They've done it here, helping candidates in Utah, but going outside of Utah and doing it specifically for President Trump, it created some really cool conversation opportunities that I will forever be grateful for with my 2 boys.
Well, I know my wife and I were able to go to the national convention, and we had such a great group there.
Oh, it was phenomenal. And I mean, tell me, didn't it feel more like a religious event? Not because
but there was the fervor, right?
Yeah, and we're
coming
together.
off of that event where President Trump got shot. I just remember feeling, tingly actually, as Trump walked into that national convention, right?
Well, weren't the speeches so good?
Oh.
From all walks of life, all corners of the country.
Who ever thought you would hear from the president of the Teamsters Union at a Republican convention? I mean, it's surreal, right? Definite change in broadening the appeal of the party, right? And I think that's one problem I think a lot of people are worried about here with respect to our party is how do we get people working together instead of against each other?
Yeah, no, that's a critical one. Luckily, I think we have a pretty easy place to start. You have the party platform. And if somebody hasn't read the platform, they can go to our website, utgop.org. You can go into the menu and drop down. You'll see governing documents. Pull up the party platform. It's a pretty short document, just a couple of pages.
And that's the thing that unites us
that's
together.
What unites us.
That's what defines whether you're a Republican or not, right?
Yeah.
Is that platform. And, it's funny, some of the issues that have come out, aren't even in the platform.
Yep.
Right? That have all of a sudden been the things that people say, well, that's what says whether you're Republican or not. And I just think some of it's silliness.
Yeah. Well, I think you just start there. And we all have talents. We all have experiences. We all have different styles. My style is going to be different than your style. And your experience is going to be different than my experience. But we need all of it. And I love the idea of what makes Utah a special place is we care more about social connection than anywhere else in the country. Every metric, every study looking at these issues, Utah outperforms anywhere else for a host of reasons. But we have built community, we have built family, we have still relied on faith and traditional values. This brings people together. Yet sometimes politically, we still treat each other as how quickly can we divide and separate, and oh, you're not pure enough, or you disagree with me on this issue, so we can't work together. It's foolish. That's what outside forces want to see happening in the Republican Party, is they want to see people who agree on 80, 90, 95% at odds with one another, because then we're in a place where when the courts have horrible decisions and you have outside money bringing in initiatives that will undermine Utah, we won't be equipped to fight that because we're so busy fighting one another. We can't do that. We have to be better than that. Now, it doesn't mean, in my opinion, it doesn't mean that you water down what you believe just so that somebody feels comfortable being a Republican. The platform is pretty clear. If you're comfortable with that, or the majority of that,
then you belong in the party.
You belong here.
Right.
But if I have to water that down and ignore most of it, just find one thing you like, well, then this probably isn't your party. Right. So I don't think you need to water it down, but anybody should be welcome. And especially keep this in mind. We've talked about, I served a mission, and people go out on missions for, of course, the LDS church, but a host of faiths. Right. And they're out there talking about what matters in their life. As Utahns, we do a good job of going out and serving people and inviting them to something that we believe. We really, as political animals, should not be engaged in chasing people away. I think we need a little bit more of the missionary spirit in the Republican Party, of bringing people to the party platform and introducing them to those principles. Because those core principles and foundational platform that we believe as Republicans, those implemented in a person's life and implemented in state law will do more to benefit everybody, regardless of their demographics or socioeconomics. Those principles lead to good outcomes.
Right.
Let's introduce people to it.
And I firmly believe that if we focused on the platform, we would find that most of the people in our party believe in those platform issues, right? This is not a 80% thing. This is an over 90% thing.
Yep, exactly.
Where we agree, right?
Exactly.
It's not that we have to give up what we agree on, but I think we focus so much on kind of fringe issues that aren't really even part of the platform, and that's how we beat up each other.
Yep. And it's easy. There's a lot of Republicans in Utah. There's more Republicans than any other political party. But again, we're on the same team by and large. And purity tests, I think, are a waste of time. I think get the numbers to win. If you don't want to see our party move to be a moderate party, you want it to be a conservative party, turn out the numbers.
Right.
Keep fighting for the conservative approach, because beyond the platform, there's the different styles. You can approach implementing that platform more conservatively, or maybe you're a fiscal conservative or a social conservative. You can focus on it differently, and that's fine. But again, if you want to win the argument, you have to be persuasive. You can't do it by attack. You can't do it by division. Bring people to the cause, win converts.
Yeah, I think that's precisely. Well, we're out of time, so why don't you make what's your final pitch to delegates?
Yeah, final pitch to delegates. Any of you that watch this between now and the state convention on May 17th down at Utah Valley University, I hope you look at all the candidates. I hope you look at there's 2 contended races, the chair and secretary. That was the word I was looking for. The secretary and the chair position. So 2 candidates in each of those races. Get to know each of them. Get to know us. And if you have any questions for me, get to know me. But a key question that I think is important for any state delegate to be asking themselves is, what do they want to see from the party moving forward? What do you hope that the party is equipped and able to deliver for the principles and platform that we believe in? And what's the role of the chair? What's the role of the secretary? Ask those questions and find the candidate that you believe will deliver for the party more than their own self-interest, and will deliver for the future success of the party, the platform, and the caucus convention system, and delegate support, rather than just, litigating an issue that's pertinent today. We need to be thinking about what's going to be successful for Utah over the next 10, 20 years.
Thank you very much. Rob
Thank you,
Axson,
John.
great having you. Thank you. We'll see you guys next week.